Welcome back, everyone, to the 2020 INARMS Symposium. Thank you for joining us for our last session of the conference. We hope you've enjoyed the informative educational speakers to date. Before we get started with the last session, we'd like to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors for nonprofit supporters include Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, Valley Oaks Health, and Oxford House. Parents of Addicted Loved Ones provides hope and support through addiction education for parents dealing with an addicted loved one. Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, thank you for being a nonprofit supporter of INARMS. Valley Oaks Health provides high-quality mental health services to the citizens of Carroll, White, Fountain, Warren, Jasper, Newton, Montgomery, Benton, and Tippecanoe counties. Valley Oaks is committed to the importance of mental health for the social, economic, and cultural well-being of these communities. Valley Oaks Health, thank you so much for your support of the INARMS Symposium. Oxford House is self-run and self-supported recovery house. With more than 40,000 recovering individuals currently living in the national network of 2,754 Oxford homes, Oxford House is a democratic peer-run recovery housing model. Oxford House, thank you for being a sponsor and earlier today, a speaker for the INARMS Symposium. We appreciate all of our sponsors and all of the generosity that have allowed for INARMS Symposium to be well-supported, educational, and collaborative to our audience members this year. And back to you, Blake.
Thank you very much, Sunny. Our final session of the 2020 INARMS Symposium is entitled The Impact of Law Enforcement and Addiction, Reducing Mortality with Jail MAP Programs. We appreciate everybody's attendance and participation in each of our sessions, as well as your dedication to the important issues that have been discussed yesterday and today. For our final session, we have a great team of speakers. Johnny Wilson is a master's level therapist with integrative wellness in Lebanon, Indiana. He has an undergraduate degree in addictions counseling from Indiana Wesleyan University, and he completed his Master of Social Work degree from the University of New Hampshire. Johnny is also credentialed as a Level 2 Certified Addiction Peer Recovery Coach, a medication-assisted treatment specialist, and just recently celebrated 8 years of recovery on September 12, 2020. Sheriff Mike Nielsen has been in law enforcement since 1983. He has been with the Boone County Sheriff's Department in various roles since 1989. He was elected sheriff of the county in 2014. He graduated from the FBI Academy at Quantico, Virginia in 2010 after having earned his master's degree in business management from Indiana Wesleyan University in 2002. Besides his standard duties, Sheriff Nielsen spends much of his time giving back to his community in Boone County via the BSCO, including programs for young people and inmates, providing assistance to disadvantaged families, and supporting local fundraisers. In 2017, Sheriff Nielsen established an officer wellness program in his office and hired a mental health counselor. In 2018, he was able to double the funding of that program, budgeting $50,000 to provide free counseling to employees in need. Nearly 30 of the department's 150-person staff are enrolled in the program. Tony Harris is the Chief Deputy at Boone County Sheriff's Office. He began his career as a merit deputy in the Enforcement Division of the Boone County Sheriff's Office in 1995. Since then, he has served as an operator, assistant commander, and team commander on the Boone County SWAT team, and has personally overseen these divisions: enforcement, corrections, administration, animal control, school resources, reserves, chaplains, civil, and canine. Chief Deputy Harris believes in the same philosophy as Sheriff Nielsen, which is rehabilitation, not incarceration, for inmates who are detained at the Boone County Jail. He is in the jail daily and visits with inmates that are being held inside the facility. He not only oversees the multiple programs inside the jail, but also inserts himself to be a part of them so that he can fully understand what truly benefits the inmates. Chief Deputy Harris is a firm believer that we need to seek out those who are asking for help and to help them. Tim Turner is the jail commander and captain at the Boone County Sheriff's Office. Captain Turner worked for the Department of Corrections before he began his career with the Boone County Sheriff's Office in 2016 as a corrections officer. He was appointed jail commander in 2017. Captain Turner believes strongly in the mission of the Boone County Sheriff's Office and has a true heart for rehabilitating inmates. Captain Turner's leadership style is to be fair, firm, and consistent, while offering encouragement at every opportunity to allow successful re-entry into society. He works alongside the multiple programs within the facility to ensure inmate success. Also with us is Brandon George, who is the Vice President for Recovery, Advocacy, and Programs for Mental Health America, Indiana. Brandon was one of our speakers in our previous session, and he's also joining us for this topic. We're pleased to have him back. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today. We're looking forward to hearing from you on this important topic, and we'll start with Johnny Wilson.
Hello, everybody. Very grateful to be here today and present to you on a program that's very important to me, and I know many people across the state. But before I do, I wanted to share a few anecdotes with you of my own personal experiences with law enforcement and how over the course of my life it has kind of shaped where I'm at today, I guess I would say. So as Blake shared with you in my bio, I am a person in long-term recovery. I just recently celebrated 8 years on September 12th, and very grateful for that. In fact, it's truly an honor to be here. Never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought that I would have the opportunities that I have in my life today. And I know that they're all as a result directly related to recovery, and I'm grateful for that. So, you know, I grew up in a home of law enforcement. My father was a city police officer in a small adjacent town to Lebanon, and some of my earliest experiences were very good with law enforcement. I know it was law enforcement officers, they have their own kind of camaraderie, if you will. They're very close, networking with each other. And that's kind of what I saw when I was growing up. You know, we had a lot of different parties around the holidays, and, you know, several of the officers would come over to our house and we'd have cookouts, and all of us kids would play together. And, you know, the other law enforcement officers kind of treated you as if you were their own child. And, when I was about 11 or 12 years old, things began to change for me, and I started to engage in illicit substance use, primarily smoking marijuana. And it didn't take long before things really started to spiral out of control for me. And I began to get involved in various levels of criminality, and eventually ended up becoming a ward of the state and was taken from my home. But, you know, I'm going to fast forward like 30 years because I was in active addiction for approximately 30 years of my life. And all through that experience, I went from a vision of seeing law enforcement as being good and kind of having that love and support from law enforcement to really seeing law enforcement as the enemy, and definitely being marginalized and stigmatized by law enforcement, directly correlated to my addiction. I think in many ways, law enforcement, certainly in my community and others I know, somehow think there's almost some type of a moral failing or dilemma that's going on within the individual. We're viewed as being bad, not having self-worth, value, whatever it might be. And so that kind of then redeveloped a whole picture of law enforcement for me. And as I said, it was September 12th of 2012 when I got into recovery. And throughout that time now, I've been able to, as Blake had shared, work myself through school, and now I get to work with law enforcement on a very regular basis. And you know, I think it's kind of neat because I think in many ways, as my understanding has been developing in terms of addiction and what I know about it, so too is law enforcement's. And I know certainly in the Boone County area here and many other communities local to us, there's really been a paradigm shift with how law enforcement is approaching those that have substance use disorders. And it's very encouraging, and I'm very grateful to see that. So one of the things more specifically that I'm going to focus on today is reducing mortality and recidivism through jail medication for opioid use disorder. So before I do get into that, I would just like to express my gratitude for being here today. I'd like to personally thank Justin Phillips for the invite to speak this year, Brandon George for his recommendation, Sheriff Nielsen for his heart to serve a population that so desperately needs the help, and both my directors at Integrated Wellness, Lynette Clark and Doug McGuire. My hopes are that this presentation will be both informative and educational, with allowing each and every one of you to develop a deeper understanding of this model of treatment that I'm going to present on today, which is the first model in existence here in Indiana, which is very exciting. So, in fact, there are very few models that exist throughout the country, as you'll see from my presentation. I'll begin with a focus on what we know about opioids and how dependence begins. And then I'll address how this has become problematic, not only for the individual that has opioid use disorder, but also for the correctional settings as well. And then we'll begin to look at some of the solutions that have begun to spring up around the country to address some of these problems. And we'll look at a little bit of evidence. It's still a relatively new model, and there's not a significant amount of literature out there. And then finally, I'll spend some time focusing on Boone County Jail's solution. Next slide, please. So we know that opioids are a class of drugs that include heroin, as well as many other synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, oxycodone, hydrocodone, codeine, morphine, and many others, according to the National Institute of Health. And we know that the prolonged use has pain relieving effects, but over time it can become lessened and become worse. The body can develop dependence, and addiction occurs when dependence interferes with daily life. Dependence causes withdrawal symptoms, and it makes it difficult for an individual to stop taking the medications or the illicit substances. This withdrawal will develop at the time of the discontinuation of the use, and any kind of reduction will elicit that type of a significant type of withdrawal response. Symptoms of opioid withdrawal include anxiety, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or abdominal pain. Oftentimes, individuals who engage in the abuse of opioids become justice involved, and the criminalizations of these individuals has resulted in a sharp increase with incarceration in jails throughout the country, and certainly here locally as well. As a result, we have individuals that are becoming incarcerated within these correctional settings that are forced to go through withdrawal. In these cases, various individuals across the country have sought lawsuits against the facilities, and they have argued that the forced withdrawal is contrary to the American with Disabilities Act, as well as the 8th Amendment for cruel and unusual punishment. The research demonstrates that release from incarceration is also a risk factor for drug overdose among people with substance use disorder. And we know that individuals released from incarceration are 120 times more likely to develop an overdose within the first 2 weeks of release compared to the general population. Failure to address these issues inside the correctional setting through the provision of evidence-based pharmacological and psychosocial treatments not only increases mortality rates, is cruel and unusual and leads to higher recidivism rates and greater cost to society overall. There are 3 FDA-approved medications that are used to treat opioid use disorder. They are buprenorphine, Vivitrol, and methadone. As currently, we know that MOUD is currently the gold standard for treatment. However, we also know it's most beneficial whenever psychosocial services are coupled with that MOUD treatment. There's ample research that shows that those who receive MOUD have longer periods of abstinence, reduced risk of overdose and death, and they're less likely to become infected with HIV and hepatitis C. A systematic review showed that the implementation within the jail and prison setting found that MOUD, while incarcerated, is associated with increased treatment engagement and reduced drug use behavior, such as injection use upon release. So some of the evidence in terms of some of the programs that have been established throughout the country, in Middlesex, Massachusetts, there's a sheriff's office there that's implemented a program. And in 2015, of the 350 participants, 81% had not been rearrested in 2018. So that's a stark reduction as far as recidivism. And also in Rhode Island in 2016, MOUD was implemented in every jail in the prison system, and within Rhode Island, they experienced a 60.5% decrease in post-release overdose fatalities, which is a huge number. And then in a women's jail in Philadelphia recently, they started offering buprenorphine in addition to methadone for inmates. And the preliminary data show that 40% of the women filled a prescription of buprenorphine following release, and that 50% of those women engaged in some form of behavioral health services post-release. One of the problems is that most correctional facilities disproportionately provide only the naltrexone form of MOUD, and we know that through the literature that both buprenorphine as well as methadone have better treatment outcomes. So despite the effectiveness of these treatments, in 2017, there was less than 1% of prisons or jails that provided any form of MOUD, and then even fewer that provided all 3 FDA-approved medications. Rhode Island to date is currently the only state that offers all 3 forms of MOUD within their jails and their prisons. So I want to talk a little bit about Boone County's solution to this problem of people continuing to come inside their facility that have a clinical diagnosis of OUD. Early in 2019, discussions between the Boone County Sheriff's Office and Division of Mental Health began with integrative wellness. Initially, there were a few different meetings that we had, but almost simultaneously, one of the a really neat thing is I'm involved in a outpatient MOUD program here in Lebanon, and we began to see some of those people that were in that program begin to get reincarcerated. And so I think we had our first individual prior to really starting this program, because Sheriff Nielsen's heart was supportive of allowing this person to have their medication. Really from onset, Sheriff Nielsen has been a big proponent of these discussions, and as a result of his deepening understanding of both opioid use disorder and kind of how it impacts the individual, he has had really, like I said, been a huge proponent from the beginning. Sheriff Nielsen, would you like to talk a little bit about your stance with that, how you kind of decided to come on board?
Yeah, I think it's important for everybody to understand, and I know the audience that's out there today understands that mental health issues and addiction issues are intertwined, and truly they are both diseases, and we've got to do everything we can to try to stop that stigma. Being in law enforcement for 38 years, I've seen way too many deaths, and we've got to figure out this vicious circle that continues to take place in our justice system. And one of the things that we did is we really wanted to focus on the mental health in our facility. So we went from having just a couple of years ago absolutely no mental health to having about 60 hours a week of on-site mental health services now, both from an institutional mental health standpoint and from a drug addiction standpoint. And we're pretty proud of that we've been able to get the financing put together to go to the county council and get that funded. And so far, we're looking at seeing a reduction in recidivism right now of about 9 to 10%. Now, that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but if you look at what our recidivism rate was a few years ago, we're looking at about 72%. And nationally, it's about a 64% recidivism rate. We still have a lot of work to do, but it really opened up our hearts with INWELL to go in there and start looking at how we can provide medical assisted treatment. We've been doing Vivitrol for a long time, but how can we expand that and focus on not only what we do in here to better the lives of the inmates, but how we can make sure that continuity of care is out there. And INWELL has been a great partner for that. So it's really opened up our minds and our change of philosophy about addiction and how we go about helping those folks that are incarcerated here to focus really on rehabilitation and not incarceration.
Thank you, Sheriff. So Sheriff Nielsen and Brandon George both attended a conference out on the East Coast. And when they came back, Sheriff Nielsen shared with me a toolkit that was put together from the National Council for Behavioral Health on medication-assisted treatment. Next slide, please. So it's really a document that strategically takes you through step by step on how to implement such a program within the correctional setting. One of the suggestions within that document is to form a work group. And so in April of 2020, we formed our work group, which is comprised of various stakeholders. All three, Sheriff Nielsen, Chief Deputy Tony Harris, and Captain Tim Turner are on that, as well as Lynette Clark, the Director of Integrative Wellness, myself, another licensed therapist, Jesse Lagmani with Integrative Wellness, our nurse practitioner, Debbie Summers, our physician, Dr. Crystal Jones, QCC nurse, which QCC is the medical provider within the facility, Charlie Wolpert, and then we also have Dr. Brad Ray and some of his staff from Wayne State University. And so we put this group together, and at that time began to really systematically work through this this toolkit, as I said. And some of the areas that the toolkit focused on were like program planning and design, workforce development capacity, the delivery of the treatment, linkages to care and services post-release, data monitoring and evaluation, and then finally funding and sustainability. Next slide, please. So the goal of the program was determined by the work group, and we basically have one task in mind, and we want our goal to be to reduce mortality and recidivism rates within Boone County, or for those that come within Sheriff Nielsen's facility. Another suggestion was that you formed a care team, and so we've now formed a care team. The care team consists of two of our peer recovery support specialists, Jill Lyons, as well as Drew Gaddy. We have Debbie Summers, Jesse Lagmani, and as well as two correctional officers from the sheriff's office there that participate. Really, the care team is a weekly staffing of the participants in the program, where they really objectively look and review the treatment of the individual, how it's going, how they're progressing in their treatment, and those sorts of things. So additionally, a clinical team was formed, which is comprised of myself, Jesse Lagmani, the doctor, as well as our nurse practitioner, and Charlie Wolpert, the nurse. We meet on a bi-weekly basis, and we really kind of hone in on some of the pharmacological and psychological, psychosocial components of the program, as far as policy and those things. So, as I said, Dr. Brad Ray and 3 of his colleagues from Wayne State University are currently evaluating our program. I believe they were contacted by the state. And it's really wonderful working with them. Several of the people from Wayne State have been instrumental in the development of several programs throughout the country. So they come with a real wealth of knowledge and understanding of this model, and are very supportive and very helpful as we continue throughout our work in the work group. So initially what we decided was, which kind of really coincided, worked out well with COVID. So fundamentally, we wanted to have a slow rollout. We knew that there were a lot of things to consider that were both highlighted in the toolkit, but there are also a lot of things to consider from internally, from a security perspective and things, and in regards to what Sheriff Nielsen and his staff were looking for. And so we decided to roll it out slow to kind of reduce any opportunity for any concerns with diversion or anything of that nature. Captain Turner, would you like to share a little bit on the diversion and kind of what you've seen there in terms of what we've implemented?
Well, I think that we've just went through the proper steps to ensure that there is little to no diversion. Obviously, we take them into the room. There are certain protocols and procedures that we follow. Officers are always doing the count daily with the nurse practitioner after and before they dose the individual. We check mouths before and after. They're there for a 15-minute period. So everything dissolves. They also drink water afterwards. They know that it's a very important role that they play with the diversion. They can be taken out, if you will. So I think that the ones that we have in there are taking it very seriously, and they know, and that we can see that it's making a difference.
Thank you, Captain. My apologies, but I got so focused there on the work group that I wanted to, if I could, have Chief Deputy Tony Harris kind of give some of his personal experiences in working within our group and how that's gone.
Well, Johnny, I think you hit it on the nail on the head from when you started talking as far as who we have, who the meetings are comprised of. And we have a doctor from Witham, like you said, a nurse practitioner, Inwell, the Wayne State people, and jail staff involved in those meetings. And they actually started off as meetings once a week for 2 hours. Those meetings are now every other week, and they're 1 hour. But I think having those meetings and input from those different entities involved is imperative, not only to where we are at this point, but to where we carry on. Because as Sheriff Nielsen stated earlier, this is a long-term process, and we're learning each and every week of new ways and new things that we need to be doing inside our facility to make this program work with the inmates.
Thank you, Chief. As the captain was sharing there, he touched on a few of the measures that we've been implemented, but I really feel it's important to review each and every one of these with you guys, just to give a sort of an overview of the real consideration that was given to eliminating any risk for diversion and some of the steps that we've taken to address that. So number one, we don't ever dose more than 10 participants at a time. Participants stand at a minimum of 24 inches apart. If an individual has long hair, it must be pulled back and secured. If an individual has dentures, they have to remove those dentures during the administration of the medication. Participants cannot wear personal clothing that's purchased on commissary, so they have to wear their jail oranges exclusively. No other clothing is appropriate. Next slide, please. Participants are not allowed to talk during the dosing. Prior to dosing, each participant will open their mouth to allow a jail officer to observe with a flashlight whether or not there are any foreign objects in the participant's mouth. And there you see some actual photographs as they're starting to go through some of those procedures. So this procedure is utilized in between doses and at the conclusion of the distribution process. Each participant is given a glass of water, no less than 2 ounces, and they're to drink that prior to receiving their dose of medication. Once a participant has been given their dose of medication, their mouth will once again be checked by a jail officer after a minimum of 15 minutes have passed. Once participants have had their mouths checked to ensure that the medication is dissolved properly, they're given a second glass of water, again, no less than 2 ounces to drink. If at any time during this process a participant coughs into their clothing, they will be changed out before going back to the cell block. This is just to out of concerns of the medication potentially, sticking to their clothing somewhere and them trying to transport it back to their blocks. And there's also strict measures in place for counting and logging and keeping the medication secured. And you see there in the photo, everyone is there counting the medications. It's on camera as well. Sheriff, would you like to expand upon some of your thoughts with diversion and ways we're reinforcing, ensuring that's not going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for those law enforcement audience that we have out there. That was one of the biggest hurdles for me to get over, is trying to understand what policies and procedures we could put in place here to make sure that this doesn't get diverted back into the block or outside of our facility at the same time. So we wanted to make sure that these procedures that we put in place would eliminate that. Now, for those law enforcement folks that are out there, you know that there's always that possibility that that's going to happen, and we take that into consideration. But I can tell you that the procedures that we put into place here has really eased my mind as an administrator in this office to know that I'm pretty sure 100% positive that we're not getting anything back into the blocks at this point in time. And it's only because of the procedures and the hard work of our jail officers, our nurses, our doctors, and the chief and captain here that has really eased my mind. So that took me a long time, probably 8 months to a year, just to get over that fear of it being diverted. But I feel very comfortable now that we're doing that, and we'll continue to do that in the future.
Absolutely. So currently we are within the facility utilizing 2 different medications, the naltrexone as well as buprenorphine. Ultimately, I think collectively our goal is to eventually have methadone dispensary within the jail and be dispensing methadone, which leaves the individual up open to all 3 different forms of medications if they're interested in. The current criteria for an individual to access buprenorphine is having an existing prescription for buprenorphine in the community, or they have to present as being in acute withdrawal book-in or shortly thereafter. So we've currently implemented a really nice and innovative approach to assessing individuals as they come into the facility. So each and every individual that comes into the Boone County Jail facility is given an iPad. And on that iPad, we have a screening tool in place, what's called the RODS, which is the Rapid Opioid Dependence Screen. Every individual, as I said, that comes into the facility has to answer this screening tool. In the event that an individual has a positive score on the RODS, it simultaneously records that data and sends it directly to the REDCap data collection system at Indiana University, as well as it generates an email and sends it to our peer supports. The expectation of the peer support is that they will respond to the Boone County Jail within 24 hours. And during that time, they will assess whether or not that individual is really wanting help, looking for help, kind of what some of their needs are. They'll open a chart on the individual and kind of begin to start that treatment process. Also at that time, they'll send out an email to the clinical team, and the coordination will begin through the clinical team's collaboration with regards to getting that individual in for services appropriately. As I said, the peer supports respond within 24 hours. Peer supports emails the clinical team and consideration for services begins. The first step is a full history when they meet with the nurse practitioner. So they'll do a full history and physical, which encompasses lab work and a urine drug screen. We also have now began to do lab work for the detection of hepatitis C virus as well as HIV. This was something that was really important to the sheriff, and I'll let him speak on that a bit.
Yeah, a lot of administrators are out there, especially jail, may take this from a standpoint of this is going to cost us money if we find out that somebody is HIV or Hep C positive. And as we looked at doing this treatment, we thought it was really important for the client that we do everything we can to protect them. And it was important to do these two tests. So if we find somebody that is positive, we will bear that cost for treating hepatitis C and HIV, which is expensive, but in the long run, it was the right thing to do for the client. And that's constantly going to be our philosophy, is doing the right thing for the right reason.
Thank you, Sheriff. Absolutely. Next slide, please. So once they meet with the nurse practitioner and they kind of get that early lab work done and things, just to assess liver function, various things like that, to see that they might be able to have the naltrexone if that's the course of treatment, and or the buprenorphine. So we'll begin the induction protocol. I guess I will add, I don't have within this presentation, but we currently have 19 pages of policy and procedures that have been developed and worked through with the work group. It's very extensive and it covers a lot of various concepts related to this programming. So the protocol will begin for the induction. If the induction is warranted, isn't warranted, I'm sorry, they'll continue to monitor them medically. So as an example, maybe an individual comes in and they have used benzodiazepines and their levels are extremely high, and it might be contraindicated at that time to put them on buprenorphine for any potential risk with respiratory suppression or anything of that nature. They'll be monitored medically. Once they determine that it's appropriate to reassess them for an induction, we will utilize the COWS, which is chronic opioid withdrawal scale. And we're looking for a score of moderate to severe withdrawal in order to establish an appropriate dose of buprenorphine at that time. So as of 9/26/20, we currently have 19 participants in the jail that are on buprenorphine and 10 individuals on naltrexone, which is really exciting to know that we're now making a difference in those individuals' lives. They no longer have to go outside of those doors at release and worry about mortality, overdose. So all these individuals that come into the program receive a full biopsychosocial assessment from a licensed clinical social worker. During that time, the social worker will basically take a snapshot of their life and develop a treatment plan for them. We have an array of services, psychosocial services, that are offered to the participants of the program. It consists of individual therapy, a matrix model group, as well as peer support services. So one of the things that we focused on within the group early on, which is talked about in the toolkit, is the concept of medication first. And there's a model that was implemented, I believe, in St. Louis. And when I began to educate myself on the model, what it really reminded me of is the housing first model. And so basically what medication first model suggests is that I have the 4 principles there on the bottom of the screen. So people with OUD receive pharmacotherapy treatment as quickly as possible prior to lengthy assessments or treatment planning sessions. Maintenance pharmacotherapy is delivered without arbitrary tapering or time limits. Individualized psychosocial services are continually offered but not required as a condition of pharmacotherapy. And then finally, pharmacotherapy is discontinued only if it's worsening the person's condition. So we, as I said, heavily rely on peer supports. We do have the expectation in our program that the individual meets with a peer recovery coach for 1 hour a week. That's the only expectation as far as psychosocial services. The rationale behind that is that our peer supports from get-go really began to put together a discharge plan for that individual. So we automatically are starting to look at that reintegration back into the community in a host of different areas. It also is very effective for forming a relationship. It helps them to identify and develop recovery capital within the community that they can utilize, as well as other services. So we put together a specific curriculum for the peer support program, and it really relies heavily upon the WRAP, which is a Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And it looks at 8 different domains of an individual's life, and it helps them to develop goals. And it also helps them to identify any potential barriers that they might need to remove or overcome before they reintegrate back into society. I know Captain Harris, or I'm sorry, Chief Deputy Harris has been very excited about the peer support model. So I would just like for him to speak on that, if he would.
Right. Johnny, when you asked me a little over a week ago that I was going to need to talk in here, I was trying to figure out what I was going to say, but at the same time, it hit me this week. I should go and visit the inmates, and we picked 2 random inmates, and I've got letters from both of them in front of me. I had the permission to read them to everybody here. So I'd like to read those letters, and so the people actually get a feel of what the inmates are seeing and feeling back there. The first one is from a male inmate. My name is Adam Glenn. I've been addicted to heroin and opiates for well over a decade, and I've never had an honest plan or anyone's help to gain or maintain sobriety. I've been through many treatment facilities that help you just while you're there, and without structure or a plan, throw you back out to the wolves of addiction. I never in my wildest dreams would have thought the place that would care enough and give me my first true shot at burying my addiction to opioids would be in a county jail. The program that they offered me provides a plan. They provide people that listen and understand what I need. They assist you in further treatment even when your time is up. This program will save lives, I have no doubt about it, because it's saved mine. They've provided me with a counselor whom I will see when I'm released as well. They also set you up with a Suboxone provider before you leave, which covers you in every aspect needed to maintain and be successful in sobriety. This program doesn't just help myself either. My wife said, knowing I'm in this program and having a plan and a support is the biggest relief and a bit of hope our family has had at actually being a family again. I thank you from deep within my heart, Boone County Sheriff's Department and Suboxone program. You have honestly given me the best shot at sobriety I have ever been offered. Thanks again, inmate Adam Glenn. And the second one is from a female inmate. Again, these are random inmates that are in your program. First and foremost, the Suboxone program has saved my life. Of this, I am certain. I was a heroin addict doing up to 3 grams a day when I was arrested. For the first time during my incarceration, I received recovery meetings and the help I've needed all along to be sober for good this time. My son, my family, and my support system out there don't have to worry about me getting released and overdosing. When I get out, I have this program to thank for that. And I hope and pray for other jails to follow along to help more addicts. There's more to this program than the medicine. It's the meetings, it's the therapy, it's the program in its entirety that will give me the tools I need to stay sober. I thank God every day for this program and the people that made it possible. Respectfully, sincerely submitted, Desiree Burnham. I think that speaks volumes to what we're doing here. And it really speaks volumes to us as law enforcement. I think the folks out there need to know that from an enforcement side of this, in 2015, when Sheriff Nielsen asked me to be his chief deputy, one of the key things that he had me oversee as the jail program, and I continue to oversee it. When I first took that responsibility over, I was very leery of it because I really didn't understand the jail, right? As law enforcement, we go into the jail and we see people that were taken off the streets at their worst, wanting to fight, kick, call us every name in the book. But at the same time, what we need to realize as law enforcement too is a change of mind process when we actually have time to see those people come down off their highs 2 weeks into our facility, and we begin to see them as normal people, and not only normal people, people that are wanting and needing that help and asking for it, and we need to help those people, right? So those are just some of the things that we see inside our facility, but this program has been very helpful to those people inside the program, and we see it day in and day out, not only me, but the captain being back there and the sheriff going back and talking to the inmates as well. So, and just hearing it from the inmates sells it all to us.
Yeah, very powerful. Thanks for sharing that, Chief. So as I said, we really rely on peer supports. You know, from get-go, they're starting to establish the psychosocial services, their appointments, medication appointments, housing, etc. Anything that they need to get in place prior to release, we're working on that. We want that transition and reintegration back into the community to be smooth and fluid, and we want to ensure that continuity of care. The continuity of care has been something that the sheriff has advocated for from the beginning, and he really was able to understand that that was really the gap in everything. So I'll let him speak on that.
Yeah, I think from the day I became sheriff, I knew when we were releasing inmates, they'd go right back out and they'd come right back in, or we'd find them dead of an overdose. And we really got to thinking, how do we fix that problem? And that continuity of care, somebody to hold their hand when they walk out this door, and then have the tools with them. We give them what we call a go bag when they check out. In the go bag, we have naloxone, we have a $10 meal card. We have all of the folks out there when it comes to needing help, who they can go to. But most importantly, they know where they need to go when they go out because they've already established that relationship with InWell. So that is for those that are listening out there that are in our business of incarceration, rehabilitation, that is so important for you to understand. We can spend a year fixing people inside of here, but when they go outside, they need that continuity of care. And that's where we were failing our folks, that our clients, when they walked out the door, and we needed to change that. And I think we've come a long way in doing that just because we have that continuity of care now.
Thank you, Sheriff. So when an individual in the program is released into the community, our nurse practitioner calls in a 1-week bridge prescription to whatever location, geographical location might be going to. They'll call that into the pharmacy of their choice. The expectation is that the peer supports already have that appointment in place for their first appointment, so that the bridge script for 1 week is sufficient. So one of the things that we've continued to see is that when individuals are released from the facility, one of the barriers with really ensuring that continuity of care is a lack of a payer source. And so we're now working on a really innovative approach to ensure that participants have Medicaid when they walk out that door. And so you know, through the cooperation of the sheriff and his heart for serving this population, we're now working on getting measures in place so that when they leave, they have that in place, and it ensures that continuity of care as far as continuing their psychosocial services or medication appointments, whatever it might be.
And we pick up that cost.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, there's a very minimal cost of about $2, but the sheriff has decided that he's going to pick up that cost for each individual. So very generous, and really again, just kind of ensures that continuity of care. So currently the tentative start date for opening this program up to the entire jail population for those that meet the clinical diagnoses of having an opioid use disorder is January 1st of 2021. Our current projections indicate that approximately 30% or 60 to 70 of the 200 plus justice involved individuals in the Boone County Jail will be receiving some formulation of medication assisted treatment. Next slide, please. So my hopes are that other jails throughout the state and that the Department of Corrections will begin to see a reduction in mortality and recidivism and understand the significant cost savings to our communities. Thanks to role models like Sheriff Nielsen and his great passion and understanding for mental health treatment, law enforcement agencies are starting to understand now more than ever the monumental role they can have in the treatment of OUD. Next slide. So there's some contact information. I think all of you are going to have access to the slides that they briefly went by there. And then here's the information on the toolkit that I shared with you that we worked from in creating this program within Sheriff Nielsen's facility. Very wonderful tool, very clear and concise and really goal driven. So thank you all for allowing me to speak today.
All right, thank you very much, Johnny, and the team at Boone County, Sheriff Nielsen, Major Harris, and Captain Turner. I'm going to talk a little bit in just a second about some of the national initiatives around this topic, how it ties into other community efforts, and a little bit where some other areas where Boone County's program has been highlighted in some of these national efforts. One of the things I want to say before I get started is just how grateful I am to be able to work across different lines with law enforcement and behavioral health, with people that are really focused on a solution. Sheriff Nielsen, the team there, has been on the cutting edge of treatment for people with addictions for a long time. This isn't the first time they've come to the table. They've done so for years and years and years. They were the first people to believe in therapeutic communities within the jail in Indiana. That program has been replicated a bunch. He believed in Vivitrol at the very beginning when nobody else was doing that. And now here we are with another transition to providing all medications. And they're on the very front end of this. And I have no doubt that this is going to be just the first of many jails in Indiana to do so, and a big part because of Boone County. So thank you all. And we talk about having people that are in recovery at the table, and getting people closest to the problem. And if you notice on this call right now, you've got the largest leaders in law enforcement in Boone County sitting with two people that are in recovery working on a solution. And so Sheriff Nielsen just didn't say, Chief Deputy Harris didn't say, hey, we went and talked to somebody that was in recovery for about 10 minutes one day, and then we took that information, we put it in a plan. They let somebody in recovery actually help drive this entire plan. So thank you, Johnny, and thanks to the Sheriff's Department. All right, next slide. So some of the things that that are going on across the country, I want to touch on a couple national projects. Next slide. One of the things that Johnny mentioned that helped drive some of this is the National Council for Behavioral Health. And they, about a year and a half ago or so, started working on this toolkit. One of the things that they realized is it's one thing to know that jails and prisons don't have medication, they don't offer medication. But they also realize this is really pretty far outside law enforcement's lane. We're talking about medications for opioid use disorder. And so they worked with Rhode Island, a variety of stakeholders, to come up with this toolkit. They released it in the beginning of January. As Johnny mentioned, me and Sheriff Nielsen and Colonel Dawson, actually from Scott County, all went way out to the East Coast and spent several days at this conference. I was able to talk to a group of about 300 law enforcement and corrections folks about stigma, about the reasons we need to embrace medication in this area. I remember picking the sheriff's brain too after we went. He saw this, and I was asking him, what he's thinking. He said, "We're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do." This exact same message that he shared with you guys. This was not easy for Boone County to step out and do. It was not popular, and he may not say that, but I'll say it for him because it wasn't. And there's a lot of people that still. There's a lot of grumblings about it, but the sheriff, he's not going to let that hold this back. He's going to do it because it is the right thing to do. He knows that it's going to save lives. So next slide. Another group that's done some tremendous work in this area, and I was able to talk about Boone County's program in their summer series. They did a 3-part summer series all around medications for opioid use disorder and how it relates to corrections and jail settings. One of those that I participated in was MOUD in corrections in rural communities and medium-sized communities, which is most of America. I mean, we think a lot about our big cities, but the reality is most of the jails out there are Boone County jail, a couple hundred inmates in rural areas. And so how does that look different than other areas? Brad Ray, Dr. Ray, who's doing the data collection for this project in Boone County, also was featured in this initiative as well. And how do we track so we can see the impact that it's having? Next slide. As we make a whole bunch of transitions and trying to get medications into correction settings, there's another part of the criminal justice system, and that's the judiciary. And the judiciary is going over a transformation in education on this topic as well. Our state Supreme Court Chief Justice, Loretta Rush, has been heading up the National Judicial Opioid Task Force for the last several years. And one of the things that they realized is that the judges hadn't been educated on this topic. And as much as they, I always assumed that, there's certain folks that just had a wealth of knowledge on every single topic. And the reality is things change over time. And a lot of thoughts, feelings, ideas were outdated. There's a lot of judges, and still are a lot of judges, that won't allow participants to begin their court or continue to take medications like methadone or buprenorphine. And she realized that there needed to be mass education. And so they worked with a big group. I was an advisor on this, gratefully, again, to have somebody in the recovery community be a voice on it. And they created this toolkit, and it's at the screen. I've got a link on there. And the goal is to provide best practices around opioid use disorder. So they talk about peer supports that Johnny talked about. They talk about medications for opioid use disorder. They talk about the need for a comprehensive treatment team. And each of the 50 chief justices in every single state are responsible for training their own trial court judges. And now they have a set of bench cards and a report to help do that. And so the more we're going to see communities, both in law enforcement, in jails, you're also going to see the judiciary starting to support this. And so it's really important to make sure that those sectors are working together. If a judge might expect that if somebody goes to jail, they're going to have access to medications, or them knowing that they might be leaving Sheriff Nielsen's jail on medication and making sure that their court is accepting of medication. Next slide. Legal Services Corporation, another area. Again, Johnny mentioned there was a couple lawsuits around medications inside a jail or lack of access to it. Legal Aid played a role in that. Legal Action Center, who's not listed here, but Legal Services Corporation also a big focus on making sure that some of these legal needs are met in this area. There's a lot of mothers that have DCS cases that aren't allowed to take medication. They're not allowed to have their kids back simply because they take a medication. And I can't tell you how kinds of wrong that is. Johnny mentioned earlier, it's the truth. It is the gold standard for care. And so you're telling somebody that you cannot get the best treatment for your disease. And if you do, you can't have your kid back. And so that's just, it's fundamentally wrong. And this group helps out significantly with that. You can see a bunch of Indiana leadership on there. Congresswoman Brooks, our now director of DMHA, Jay Chaudhary, Chief Justice Rush, all involved in the initiatives here to make sure that people aren't that their legal rights are being represented and people and institutions aren't forcing them to do things that they shouldn't do. Next slide. There is an article that we wrote, and I just put this in here, and specifically because of COVID and incarceration and access to medication, that talks about access to medication. Some people that are doing it right, some people that are doing it wrong. And luckily, Indiana is in a really good spot with some of these, but you guys take a peek if you want to look at that. Next slide. Couple state projects I want to mention again that are tied in with this. This is the program that we're talking about and highlights. Next slide. The governor's office. One of these, obviously Johnny explained how this came to fruition and how they got into conversations with the Sheriff's Association and DMHA. But the drug czar and Governor Holcomb have dedicated $4 million to expanding access to medication for those with opioid use disorder inside of jails. So if you are corrections or law enforcement, get with the Indiana Sheriff's Association, get with the governor's office, call Sheriff Nielsen if you're teetering on the line about this, if you got questions. I've never heard them turn down a conversation when people are soliciting advice, so please reach out. Next slide. And then something that I'm really proud to have been engaged with, and everybody else that's on here as well, is Indiana University School of Medicine has been running something called Project Echo for several years. And the goal is to provide training and education to a variety of folks when it comes to medications for opioid use disorder. They've had what they call tracks, which are 10, 12-week sessions. They've had them just for providers to learn about medications. They've had them for clinicians just to learn about medication best practices. And most recently, last year, they did an echo session to help train folks on how to do MOUD in correction setting in jails. And largely, this was based off of the Boone County program. Again, this is the only one that is in the state up and running. And so we were able to not talk about hypotheticals. We were able to point to a program that actually works, that's being implemented, that was done with the right way. I think Johnny noted how they, some people would say it might be slow, but they were making sure that things were done properly, and they were being very tactical with their approach. And we were able to teach almost 100 people week in and week out about this. And so there's going to be another one coming up. I put the link on there. Kristen Kelly is the person that oversees that. Again, reach out to these people that have been involved, the Sheriff's Office, Governor's Office. IU School of Medicine will be doing another track on this in the future, so that if you want to get a more in-depth understanding, if your jail is getting ready or on the cusp of doing this, this will provide some opportunity to learn about that in a weekly manner and learn all the different aspects. So I'm grateful to be in just a piece of this. I am, again, just at the all of the work that's been done by this group. And what can really happen when people from different backgrounds, different industry come together. You know, look, Johnny mentioned it, the relationship a lot of times between the SUD community and the law enforcement, it's adversarial. And even once people get into recovery, they've got that left in their mouth. And I couldn't disagree more with my relationship with law enforcement. Being able to walk into Captain Turner's office and me not understand something that he did and be able to say, Captain, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Why would you do this? And him rattle off 5 reasons on why it did and educate me on that. And then later on, I could be walking down that jail and Captain Turner can say, Brandon, office, 5 minutes. And me go in there and him, Brandon, why is this or X or Y or Z? And be able to talk to him and us really learn from one another. And that doesn't mean, you know, his goal is public safety and mine is public health. And so they're not always going to match perfectly. But when we work together, we can find a much better solution. So thank you all very much. And hopefully this expands some hearts and minds and saves some lives.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your love and compassion for the recovery community. I think John Lee, one of our audience members, says it best when he says, as a person in long-term recovery, I want to thank all the presenters here because I'm a product of the Boone County Recovery Program. These gentlemen here are the reason why I'm here and have helped to save my life. Thank you for your incredible program, the work that you are doing, and so much of the collaboration that's resulted in a community program that really works for the community. We're going to take a look at a few questions from our audience members now. First off, a question regarding continued collaboration. Jeannie Reed writes, thank you so much for allowing this within your county jail. Could you share what is happening post-release, and is there support today and collaboration with corrections or probation within the county on this program?
I guess I would speak to that. So as I said throughout the presentation, we really focus on that continuity of care and ensuring that they have the best opportunity and chances at continued recovery when they are released. And so oftentimes these individuals are still in the criminal justice system when they leave in the capacity of being on community corrections or probation. And so we always work hard to collaborate with whatever that system is and try to ensure that we are working to make sure that the individual has the best opportunity to continue their recovery and become a productive member of society.
Thank you, Johnny. Some really context questions and logistics questions. For the inmates that are part of this program, are they housed in a separate pod, or are they a part of the general population?
I guess I'll answer that. They're all in general population, so they come out of all blocks.
And this was a concern for the diversion, since we do not have a dedicated block, is to making sure that it doesn't get back there. And we've been very successful with that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. From Melissa Day, would the Boone County program be willing to share what your wellness recovery action plan looks like?
I'll speak to that. Anything that we have is open and yours. If we make a difference in one person's life, if we can save that person from scooping them up once they leave and putting them in a body bag, then everything that we've done has been worth it. Just one person. And obviously we've got 3 testimonies here that we've made a difference in 3 people's lives. So that right there is testimony to the fact that we need to be doing this across the state and across the country, because it does save lives and it does make a difference in making them a productive member of society again. So yeah, you can reach out to any of us, reach out to Johnny. Brandon has got all the examples as well. We'll share everything that we can for your program to get started.
I guess I would just add to that if I could. So the wrap specifically that we use comes from William White, which is really an advocate for recovery in all areas. So.
Thank you so much. What are down road additional innovations or additional programming that you're looking to implement?
I'd like to say just a couple things, and then I'm sure Johnny will say something here. My biggest concern out of all this, and I'd be remiss if I did not thank the governor himself, Doug Hunsinger, who's been great partners for their passion in treating opioid issues throughout the state. I have worked with a lot of people, but seeing Doug and the governor and speaking to them, I am just at awe in how much they care about this population. My concern is sustainability. People are probably wondering how we've been able to pay for some of this. A lot of this has come from funds that we've generated here, but this program is being now supported by the $4 million grant that the Sheriff's Association has been awarded for us. And I can tell you that we're going to need a lot more funding than that to sustain this. What we don't want to do is get these programs going, make a difference in people's lives, and then 2 years down the road, not to be able to sustain those. So this program and other programs is going to remain a priority on making sure that we're successful. But in order to do it, we have to have the state and federal funds to make sure that we're successful to do that. Johnny, I'll let you talk there.
Yeah, as far as programming specific, I would say definitely we would like to see that third formulation of methadone added so that the individual does have a choice to all three FDA-approved medications in their treatment. I think it's important. Treatment should be self-directed, and we need to be supportive of that individual in their recovery, whatever path they choose to take. We would also probably like to see an increase in psychotherapy services within the facility. Unfortunately, space is oftentimes an issue, but hopefully in the future, Sheriff's vision is to have a new facility that would open up a lot more opportunity. But I will say we capitalize, I ensure you, we capitalize on every bit of space in time we have for the provision of services. So Monday through Friday, it is definitely a humping facility. It's nonstop, so.
Thank you, gentlemen. Can you talk a little bit about the family participation when family visitation comes into the jail and or any other community-based programs in assisting the inmates?
Johnny, you want to get that?
Yeah, so we have, as I said, the matrix model group that's currently in the facility. One of our goals was with ensuring that continuity of care, you know, we never know when an individual might potentially be released. And so we wanted them to have access to that treatment when they reintegrated back into the community as well. So we do have a matrix model group within the community. So an individual can come straight from within the facility and transition right into that community group. The matrix model also has a family component to it, which is very helpful. And so we really integrate then the family into that treatment component for them. We also offer services within the facility for any individual that might have an open DCS case or kid track referral or anything of that nature.
It's really phenomenal support and community-wide. You had such impactful letters. Thank you so much for seeking direct feedback from the individuals the program is supporting. When you look across the community from the Boone County perspective and also looking at additional rural communities, what would be a key partnership or additional outreach that you still need in support of this program?
Let me address that. What I can tell you is I think Brandon mentioned it, that this is still unpopular throughout the country. And I take a lot of public criticism for doing this, but when you do the right thing for the right reason at the right time, I'll take that. And again, testimony is that we're going to see the reduction in recidivism. We're going to hopefully prevent them from overdosing and dying. But I think one of the most important things that we can do here is make sure that the partnerships that you have are in this for the right reason. We're in this for rehabilitation because we believe in our inmates, and we believe that they can be successful when they walk out the door. You want to make sure, such our partnership with Inwell and Brandon George, they truly have it in their hearts to help this type of population. And that is what really sold me on Brandon many, many years ago. And we do a presentation together about that, because if you're dealing with a company that don't believe in what they're doing and they want to do it for money, it's not the right reason and you won't be successful. But creating those partnerships out there with people that believe that it's the right thing to do and you're doing it for the right reason is going to be key to your success.
You know, the other thing that Sheriff Nielsen said is it's really, and it really hits home, and he says it all the time. It's one at a time, right? And when we go out in the community and we see these people that's been inside our facility and they look at us and they got a big smile on their face and they said, hey, I've been clean, and we do hear this. This is truth. I've been clean for 3 years, and they got a big smile on their face. Those are wins for us. And it not only makes them feel good, but it also makes you feel good because you know that you're doing the right things for these people. And if those people are telling their family members and then telling people in the community, and we've got people like you speaking to those people too, this program will work and it will succeed because we have seen it succeed. We do have those wins out in the community of these inmates that are going out and they are staying clean, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I guess I would add to that question too. One of the things I would say that we notice and see as a real need is that oftentimes there's a limitation on prescribers, those that are ex-waiver, data waivered, and willing to work with this population. So I don't know if Overdose Lifeline still offers it, but I know they offered to pay for the physician's training for them to sit down through the training and get data waiver. But for whatever reason, there's, you know, as the sheriff touched on, the stigma that is associated with it, I think is largely one of the problems. You know, we need to continue to educate that this is the gold standard. It's evidence-based, and it works, and it changes lives. And so the more we can get people on board with that, I think the more we're going to be addressing the issues.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your dedication, your hard work, your efforts for the recovery community. Your Boone County solution is not only impactful, but an inspiration to us all on what collaboration and innovation can do in support of the recovery community. Thank you very much for your information and your presentation, your open-mindedness and your passion. And we conclude our Impact of Law Enforcement and Addiction session here. Thank you again. I'd like to turn it over to Justin Phillips with Overdose Lifeline to provide the concluding remarks to the INARMS Symposium. Justin? Oh, Justin, if you could unmute.
So sorry. I apologize for all that. Good afternoon. I'll start over. I echo Sonny's sentiments. Thank you to Sheriff Nielsen and Brandon George and the InWell team for the panel and the impactful information and really the solution to individuals who find themselves incarcerated with substance use disorder. We appreciate your leadership for quite a few number of years now in the efforts that you've put toward helping individuals. And it has been, you know, just a great couple of days. Despite our challenges around COVID-19 and pandemic, we've had some amazing conversations, some really important information, some great solutions to providing continued recovery in the state of Indiana. We are so grateful to the Division of Mental Health and Addiction and Family Social Service Administration for hosting and providing the INARMS Symposium again this year. Overdose Lifeline is just privileged to help put all the pieces together, and we appreciate tremendously the sponsorship that you see on your screen to help pull this off, and all of those that have attended. Thank you. Thank you for showing up and sitting at your computer all day for the last 2 days. We will be providing the CEUs for the conference and links to the videos and the PowerPoint presentation, so watch your email. And thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.